Hi, I'm Marcy with Community Kitchen ATL, and I'm thrilled to partner with Make and Do Community to put on a virtual workshop to show you how to put together a beautiful cheese board. First and foremost, when I put together any sort of board, I always have 5 different components: cheeses, meats or charcuterie, savory items, sweet items, and then delivery devices. So I'm going to show you a selection of all 5 of those components and how to put them together on a beautiful little board. The board I'm using today is a small board, which would feed probably 1 to 4 people. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The first cheese I'm showing you today is a coastal English cheddar. It is an aged English cheddar that I love because as it ages, it's a crumblier cheddar. So I buy it at Costco, but as it ages, the wonderful thing about this cheese is it crystallizes. So it has this really nice kind of crunchy texture to it. And as you can see, I am cutting my cheddar into smaller, more bite-sized pieces. And when I put my cheese on my board, I spread it around so that my guests, as they're approaching my board, can grab what they want without having to reach over it. This is especially important as you start building larger boards for larger crowds. The second cheese I have today is the St. Angel blue cheese. This is a really wonderful triple cream brie. I love it because it has a little smattering of the blue inside, and it is a lovely addition to any cheese board. This piece is actually a little bit big, so I'm going to cut it into a smaller piece and put it on my cheese board. The third cheese I have today is an 18-month-old Gouda, aged Gouda. I'm often asked about the rinds of cheeses. This one has that sort of waxy outer layer of it, which I am going to cut off because you don't want that, obviously, on your cheese board, and you don't want your guests having to peel that off themselves. So we're gonna take this off. I've cut my cheese into smaller pieces, and again, I'm gonna put it all over my cheese board, spread it out a little bit. When it comes to the rinds of cheeses, soft cheese like my triple cream blue, any sort of soft cheese, the rind is part of the character of the cheese. So you do want to leave that on there and encourage your guests to eat it. The Gouda that has the waxy outside, if the rind looks like it is not part of the natural aging process of the cheese, you want to make sure you remove it. Okay, first component, all of my cheese is on my board. Second component, my charcuterie, my cured meats. I have just some basic Italian dry salami here today. And the way I present my meats is I just fold them in half, just like so, and kind of feather them out a little bit. So you have, not super fancy, but it does look nice, a little sort of array of meats that you're putting together to put on your board and make it look really nice. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start tucking my meats in between some of my cheeses that I already have placed on my board. I'm gonna do this with the meat I have in here. And again, when you're talking about charcuterie, I typically always put an Italian dry salami. It's just a really nice, mild salami that most people enjoy. But you can also, don't be afraid to put a spicier charcuterie on your board. It's really a matter of personal preference. So whatever you like, put on there. What I would not recommend doing is putting an entire piece of sausage on your board. If you do buy your sausage in links, make sure you peel off all the coatings and then cut it up for your guests. So I have my second component placed on my board. My third component is going to be my savory items. And today I have 2 different types of savory items. I have a basic kosher dill, baby dill pickle. So these are smaller varieties of kosher dills, almost like a little French cornichon, which are the really tart French pickles. I'm gonna put those on my board and kind of spread them out again like I did for my cheese and my cured meats. The second savory item, so one thing I don't ever put on my board is any sort of fresh vegetable. I really prefer the pickled types of vegetables, and you can do anything from obviously pickled cucumbers to pickled okra to pickled asparagus. The sky is the limit when it comes to pickled items. So I typically do a pickled vegetable rather than fresh vegetables on my boards. The second savory item I brought today was my Marcona almonds, which I buy in bulk from Costco, but I jazz these up a little bit. So what I do is I empty some of them out of the original container, drizzle them with a little bit of olive oil, and then I use this wonderful local product that I love. It's a beautiful briny sea. They're French picnic sea salt. And I toss the almonds with the olive oil and the nice savory salt, and it really makes them more gourmet and really delicious for your guests to try. Marcona almonds can be quite expensive if you buy them sort of already pre-prepared. So this is a nice kind of economic way to enjoy this amazing product, but then make it your own by customizing it with your favorite savory salt and olive oil. The next component I put on my board is my sweet item. So I have 3 types of sweet items that I brought today. The first is my peach honey jam from Emily G's, which is another local product here in Atlanta, which I love. And what I do with these jams is I typically put a nice little glass container on my board, and then, for lack of a better term, decant my preserves or my jams and just put it on my board in a smaller container, especially if I'm doing a smaller board. That way you use only what you need and you don't have a big jar of jam sitting on your board. If the jam that you're using comes in a smaller, really pretty type jar, pop the lid off and set it directly on your board. That works too. The second sweet item I brought are these beautiful spring strawberries. When I'm building my boards, I always try to use seasonal fresh fruit as much as I can. I know that becomes difficult in the wintertime when there are not a lot of fresh berries, but there is beautiful citrus that's available in the wintertime, and I highly encourage you to use that. But otherwise, throughout the year, there are so many wonderful fresh fruit options, and I highly recommend you use them when you can. So as you can see, my berries, what I typically do is I keep the stems on, and I just slice them in half and put them on my board. That way they're still beautiful, they're really pretty. That stem adds a little pop of green to your board. So we're just going to set those again around my board in different places, spread it out. The third sweet item I have today are these amazing, delicious, this is the packaging, I buy them at Costco, dark chocolate covered dried apricots. They are so good, and they add just a little bit of a sweet kind of desserty option to your board. I love really anything dark chocolate, and they really add a nice additional sweet item to your board that everyone seems to enjoy. You can also just use plain dried fruit in the wintertime if you're having a difficult time coming across fresh fruit. Last but certainly not least are my delivery devices. So as you can see, I have a little glass jar that I've placed on my board, and I've put a few little picks in them. So these are just bamboo knot picks. I always add a little jar with the picks in it. The reason being, I have cut all of my components up into smaller bite-sized pieces. My cheese especially, cheese and charcuterie in particular, are meant to be enjoyed at room temperature. And also, the more you expose them to air, the more surface area of the cheese that you expose to air, the more it really brings out that natural flavor. So I've cut all of my items into bite-sized pieces. So that's where these beautiful delivery device of a bamboo pick comes in. Your guests can use these to stab whatever it is on your beautiful board that they want to eat. The delivery device I'm using today is another local Atlanta company, George's Sourdough. I love their crackers, and these are their rosemary olive oil crackers. So the last component I'm going to start putting on my board are my crisps or crackers, and feel free to get creative with, there are tons of really delicious fruit type crisps out there. Just a basic kind of Carr's water cracker works well as well. I just personally love supporting local as much as I can. And I really love these. They're nice and thick, they're delicious, they're well made, and they work beautifully with all of the items that I've put on my board today. But they won't stay on my board, so I'm gonna have to stuff them in around here. Okay, so I have all of my devices on my board, and just a quick recap. I put my cheeses on first. I always do that and then build my board around all of my cheeses. I put my meats on next. Typically within each component, I try to do at least 2, maybe 3 or more components, depending on how large of a board you're building and how much variety you want to offer your guests. Next, I put on all of my savory items, which were the pickles and the Marcona almonds that I really jazzed up a little bit with my savory salt. The fourth component were all of my sweet items, including my seasonal fresh fruit. And last but certainly not least, my delivery devices, my bamboo picks, and my yummy crackers, rosemary crackers. Last, I'm gonna take a little snip of my fresh rosemary. And I always love to add a little sprig of rosemary to my board, and it really adds a nice little pop to this and just finishes it off beautifully. I recommend using a more hardy herb like a sage or a rosemary, even fresh bay leaves work well, but just make it your own, make it customized. During this time of quarantine when we're all stuck at home, this is a wonderful family activity to do together, and also just a beautiful product that you can enjoy at the end. Just remember, when you're putting your boards together, more is more. I really always like to have my board overflowing with all of these delicious items, and you should too. Stay safe out there.